Good morning. So we will start with a few photos, and again, welcome back for everyone who's been here, and for everyone new who's coming along. So you should be able to see our screen, um, and what we're going to do is look at a few different builds over the years. One of the benefits of Outer Reef is our ability to customize boats for our owners. So what you should be seeing now is one of our 80 series salons. This was built for a very specific owner who was very, very traditional. Pretty much everything you see in this photo was hand chosen by the owner, from soft goods, all of the chairs, gloss details, things of that nature. The same would go for this second photo. Again, a very traditional style boat. One of the unique things about this build was the owners did not want anything chrome or silver inside the boat. So we had to source and replace every overhead light, every fixture, every door handle, every door hinge, and special order all of the appliances. That settee, for example, is made out of Italian leather. We literally ordered 5 bull hides from Italy and custom constructed that settee. This is again another 80 series boat that was a much more contemporary interior, as you can clearly tell, far lighter and completely different from the other builds. Lastly, we have an 86 that the owners really wanted the boat to look like the interior of a far more modern boat, something along the lines of a Lazara, Sunseeker, something like that. So this was a complete custom interior that was designed from photorealistic renderings through completion. Again, just a completely different build. Here a photo of each of the galleys. Again, this is the same style of boat. This is the same beam. These are the same physical spaces, just a little bit of a different look at what the individuals wanted to do with their boat. Lastly, and we'll touch on this a little bit in the future, we do design sessions where we really allow the owners to pick and choose how they want their boat designed. The important thing about this layout is anything that you see either in red or magenta, note very specific changes that each of the owners wanted to do. So anywhere where you see highlighted notes, these were all very special features that this particular owner wanted to add during his design session. And I think we'd all agree there's quite a bit of detail into this. Also, just as a reminder for everyone who wasn't here last week, this is an interactive webcast, and so we highly encourage everybody to ask questions. You should have a little tab next to your window that will allow you to type in some questions. I think one of the amazing things that most people think when they look at that breadth of work is that it's amazing that the same shipyard and the same company built all of those boats, because as we saw, they're all vastly different than each other. So today we have joining us Jeff Druick. Again, Jeff is the founder and the president of Outer Reef Yachts. We have Danny Stovall, who is our purchasing and logistics manager, as well as a sales representative. And we have Deborah Dorn, who is our interior designer. We'll talk a little bit today about why choose Outer Reef. We'll meet the people behind the process, take a look at the process itself, and really look at how a client's vision of what they want to build turns into a final product. Basically, how Outer Reef builds your version of your boat, not our version of your boat. So Jeff, let's start with obviously our most valued partner here, which is Tania Shipyard in Taiwan. You looked at several yards when you were starting Outer Reef. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to why you chose Tania and some of the benefits of building in that region?
Sure, Mike. And good morning to all our attendees. It's great to see you back. If you're a return, I think there are some people that are returning from our last webinar, and anyone who's here today, welcome. Yes, I think I did touch on it briefly in the webinar last week, that I had a specific process in mind looking for a shipyard. You just don't. Taiwan, number one, was the place I wanted to go. It's one of the highest quality builders in the world, the Taiwanese. And it's hard just to walk into Thailand and say, please build me a boat. So it was a 3 to 4 year journey of actually building speculation boats at a couple of different shipyards throughout Taiwan to find one I think that would be best suited for what our goals were going to be. And at the end of that journey, we settled on the shipyard where we are currently in now. And one of the overriding factors is they're a family-owned factory. At the time when we started building with them, they were third-generation shipyard. They are now a fourth-generation family shipyard. So that tied together with our philosophy of a close-knit group and a close-knit family, and it's developed into a fantastic partnership over the years. It's a very symbiotic relationship with them, and they were very receptive as well to be able to build custom boats. At the time when we started, there was no such thing as a custom Taiwanese built boat. They were all pretty much production style boat with a couple of few modifications of fabric changes and things of that nature. But we wanted to go something that was different than what was norm in the industry. And to this day, that has been our philosophy and our business model.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. Danny, you wear a couple of different hats at Outer Reef. Not only are you involved in management in terms of managing the builds, communicating with the shipyard, but you are also a sales representative, which really translates into an in-depth knowledge, which is a benefit to all our clients. Can you give us a couple examples from your broker's perspective as to how you start the learning process when it comes to clients and what they really want out of a boat from us?
Sure, Mike. Typically, what I like to do on the sales side during my initial contact, whether it be phone calls or emails and whatnot, I try to ascertain how the client uses their boat currently, where they cruise, and where they also plan to cruise and how they plan to use the boat in the future, whether it be an Outer Reef or any other boat for that matter. What I do is I take that information and use it in order to hone in on what addendum B options I think would be best suited for the client. In addition to that would be whether or not a motor yacht, a cockpit motor yacht, or a Sky Lounge model boat would be more beneficial to the client. We spec engine size, ground tackle, whether it be a single anchor, a dual anchor, water makers, and so on and so forth. So by gathering that information, I'm able to really fine tune the addendum B, at which point we can properly price out a vessel that would be best suited for the client. And then at that point, we work on the layouts, which are all dramatically different from yacht to yacht. So that's sort of the process at the beginning stages of what we like to do here.
Okay, Danny, great. We have a question from a gentleman named Don. His question is, can prospective owners go to the shipyard? And if so, how common is it? Jeff, would you like to share a little insight on that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, Mike. Actually, we encourage the owners to spend time at the shipyard. It's not necessary or mandated that they do, but it is part of the building process. It's part of the experience, and we highly encourage that kind of participation with the client. Most clients usually go at least once throughout the build process. Typically, it's during the sea trial. It's a little bit more exciting than digging through your boat during construction. Other clients are very technically a very technical type of people, so they like to get into the nuts and bolts and dig into the bowels of the boat per se and see how she's put together. But again, to address the initial question was, yes, we highly encourage owner participation. With that, as well, our brokers are required to accompany their clients over to the shipyard, and it's twofold. Obviously, it's is to give support to their client, number one, and this is how our brokers really learn in depth of the product, from the initial lamination of the boat through plumbing and electrical. They are there through the process. Our typical salesman will be at each build 2 to 3 times throughout the process, whether they're with a client or otherwise. And this is part of the sort of the continual learning process of the product. And when I say continual, we're constantly changing equipment, updating types of processes we use in the build. So it's sort of an ongoing education with our brokers as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Yep, and even just as a bit of a follow-up on many of my visits with customers, you always find little things that that they want to change. For example, an outlet or a little dead spot that somebody wants to add some storage. So it's always a great education. We have another question here from Brett. And Danny, I'm going to let you field this one since you deal with it. He's asking if the electronics are done at the shipyard or when the boats get here. So maybe you can expand a little bit on the relationship with the Garmin people and a little bit about who installs those electronics and the process of updating the software and just doing all the commissioning.
Sure. What we do is we work exclusively with Garmin. We have a local representative in Taiwan that does all the coordination of the equipment layouts, the wiring, providing all the materials, the cabling, and they work in conjunction with the shipyard to install everything. The beauty of having that all done in the shipyard prior to the boat arriving here is that, again, the systems are completely installed, so we're not tearing the boat apart once the boat gets here, whether it be Florida, whether it be Seattle, wherever the boat is being delivered. The boat comes in 99% complete, meaning when we have our initial sea trials at the shipyard, we do a complete commissioning. Besides the other systems, we do a complete commissioning on the Garmin systems, making sure the autopilot works correctly, sonars are functioning, obviously all the screens are functioning properly. Then at which point, once the boat arrives here, we have a local technician that works with the client. Number one, give them an orientation on how to use all the equipment, and also just to set up the screens and customize things to their liking. So to answer that question, yes, the electronics are installed 100% at the shipyard prior to the boat arriving here. And that also, that also tends to cut down on the commissioning process, whereas we're shortening the time period to get the boat to the owner once it arrives.
Mike, I'm going to expand on that a little bit, and it really goes back to the question. It was maybe, forget who asked the question about choosing the shipyard. One of the imperatives for me as well was to be able to have a shipyard that was on the water. Very, very few shipyards are on the water in Taiwan. As a matter of fact, 2 of the other shipyards that I interviewed over those years were landlocked, and the boat made a single journey to the port, was put on a barge or in the water with a crane, and that was it. That to me was a non-starter. The typical scenario of most builders, even most of our competition in Taiwan, they use what's called a wet tank. It's like a large swimming pool, and they'll put it in the tank just to be able to run the systems, the engines, but not go anywhere. Our shipyard is on Kaohsiung Harbor with direct access to the ocean, and we do full-blown sea trials. It includes all the electronics, as Danny said. Those are sea trialed and commissioned, ready to go. All our stabilizer systems, our anchoring systems, for example, if we have a BB class vessel or a class vessel where you have to drop the anchors in 200 foot of water and retrieve the full length of anchor with the chain, things of that nature, they can only be done at sea. And these are pretty extensive sea trials. It'll be a day or 2 days of sea trials. If propping has to be adjusted and tuned, we'll haul it out, pull the props, retune them, send it out another sea trial. So we know when this boat is delivered into the U.S., she is tested, ready to go, and with the exception of some moderate commissioning, such as installing last bits of soft goods and decor and basically cleaning, these boats are ready to go when they hit the States or Europe or wherever their destination is.
Jeff, we have a question from Bill. He was attending our last webinar, And his question, he recalled us saying that we're very vertically integrated, that we don't work through a dealer network, that all of our offices worldwide are basically corporate offices, and how that really cuts out that typically 20 to 30% dealer network. He's asking that we don't have dealers, but we do have a full staff of professional brokers that go to the shipyard and things. And his comment or his question is, how does that really affect the pricing of the boat, and is that not an added layer of cost? And so maybe you can give a quick insight, Jeff, as to how that financial model really works with having those brokers in-house, and the benefit of having these individual brokers working with their customers.
Well, it's a multifaceted answer to that question. First and foremost is value. We've always, since day one, tried to give as much value as possible in the product. When there's a dealer network involved, 20 to 25%, as you mentioned, of that value is going to the dealer. I'd rather put that extra 20 to 25% of value in the boat and give more for the money, number one. Number two, it is a physical impossibility with a dealer network to have a custom boat being made, because most dealer models and dealer networks, there's an inventory scenario where, as a dealer, you have to inventory product line. And as you inventory, how can you physically, or how can you order something custom? I guess you could do a custom within that dealer network, but there's very, very little flexibility. And number three, getting back to the valuation side of it, without that dealer network, we can control the resale value of that vessel, because 90% or 95% of the vessels come back to us, and we control that resale market. So it's a multifaceted answer as far as the dealer network. From the standpoint of managing it, all our, as you said, as you mentioned in your prelude there, all of our locations worldwide are staffed by our own people, employees, and our own sales associates. So regardless of where you are in the world, you're dealing with the same people. If you're dealing with, say, Trevor, who runs our European office at Atlanta Pool, and we're dealing with a client, and the client is dealing directly with either Deborah or Danny in purchasing logistics, and Deborah in decor. So it's the same staff worldwide that client will be dealing with.
Yeah, and Jeff, just to expand on that just for a brief minute, and then we'll move on to a couple of other questions. We've experienced that very early on when we had an outside decor company working, and we quickly realized, in terms of the value, we were eating up 20 to 30% of the decor allowances on fees, which is why we ended up hiring Deborah and bringing that in-house. And we'll get a little bit to Deborah's department in a moment. But really, everything was meant to streamline and to be as competitive as possible on pricing. So we have another question from Brett, and Danny, you can answer this. He's asking about security systems and what's a rough cost on systems like Ghost and the one that we put in on the 72 Sky Lounge we just came in. Can you just give us a quick number, ballpark, as to what those Ghosts and the monitoring security systems run?
Well, it really depends, Mike, on what equipment they want to have installed and what actual parameters they want to use, whether it be something as simple as door sensors, motion sensors. Also, we have had some clients that put infrared sensors. So it can really get, you can run the gamut, but I'd probably say in the neighborhood of $10,000, depending on what type of system they want to install. In addition to that, you can also monitor. We offer a Maritron system that you can monitor, whether it be tank levels or high water alarms and things like that, that all work in conjunction with some of the security systems too.
Okay, great, Danny, thank you. We have a question from Peter. Hello, Peter. He's asking if it's possible to do a dinghy garage as he's seeing on some of the boats. Jeff, we'll let you answer that question.
We've had that request over the years. A dinghy garage is it's a trade-off. Okay, typically where your dinghy garage would be in stern, where we have a very copious cruise quarters, or a fourth stateroom or a fifth stateroom, whatever, depending on the client and what his needs are. I don't see, first of all, it's almost an impossibility to do in our style of vessel. But with the size of our boat decks, which are probably the largest in our class, there's plenty of storage space up on the boat deck, even in an athwartship's position, which maximizes your deck space up to 14 to 16 foot on an athwartship's installation. So I know the reasoning for it, to hide it away, but you give up so much real estate for that, i.e. in the accommodation. So we've had requests over the years, but it's really not something that we are capable of doing with our design boat.
Okay, and then Jeff, an additional question. Brett's wondering what is the average range or days on the market for used boats? And Brett, I'm assuming you're asking about our boats, not in general. As a general rule, brokerage boats stay on the market for anywhere from 12 to 14 days, according to Yacht World and SoldBoats.com. We tend to do a little bit better than that. So, Jeff, go ahead.
I think you meant to say 12 to 14 months, Mike.
Yeah, the average. Yeah, according to Yacht World, the average boat stays on the market for about 12 to 14 months. We've seen obviously much better than that. Brett's asking, what have we seen in terms of how long our boats typically stay on the market?
With our boats in Outer Reef Yachts, it's a true supply and demand market. Again, being that there is no dealer network and we're a build-only business model, it really limits the amount of resale pieces on the market. As an example, our 6570 series, which is our most popular series, I've seen them being on the market for as little as 3 to 4 weeks, and some up to maybe a year. Again, a lot depends on condition of the boat. A well-maintained vessel will move very quickly, and depending on the series, as I said, our 6570 series, they move very, very quickly, and if they're priced right. So, you know, we've had this scenario over the years where we've had a number of people make more on their boat, make money on the boats and sell them for more than they've paid for them. So I know at times they come into their resale mindset of say, well, okay, I paid $3 million for the boat, I'll market it for $4 million, which is kind of unrealistic. And you know, when they get real about the price is when they usually move. But again, getting back to that, we've had a number of vessels that have sold. Most recently, they were 270s. Both of them sold for more than they were paid, than their clients paid for them, and it's very typical. Between 90 and 95% of purchase price within 5 years of purchase. So I think that's a pretty stellar record when it comes to resale values of our boats.
Can you give us a quick idea of what build time is?
Build time is all dependent on the series and what mold is available at what time. We have 3 different sets of tooling depending on the series of boat. Our 58 to 64 foot is one mold. Our 65 to 74 is a second set of tooling, and the 80 to 90 foot is a third set of tooling. So it all depends on what's in the pipeline at the time. As an example, physical build time, a 70 is anywhere between 11 and 12 months build time. An 86 series is anywhere between 12 to 13 months build time. And the smaller series between 58 and 64, physical build time is 10 to 11 months. That's physical build time, all depending on what's in the pipeline prior to it. And when the next boat comes out of the mold, another one goes in. And a lot of our build time has a lot to do with how we build our boats. We do not take our boats out of the mold until all bulkheads are in, tanks are in, and all structural components of the boat are in the mold. Only at that point will we take it out of the mold. It's the best for structural integrity. We are not a mass production company where you have to get that boat out of the mold to get another one in. And I've seen other manufacturers pull boats out of the mold a lot earlier than they should have, in this flexing and things of that nature that go on. Once our boat leaves the mold, it goes into a steel cradle, and it sits there until the first day of sea trials. So it's directly out of the mold in its full structural integrity into the cradle, and then she's finished in that cradle. And by the time she hits the water, the boat is basically completed. So it maintains structural rigidity and everything to make a smooth hull side and to get everything level, plumb, and things of that.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. We have a lot of questions coming in, but we're going to take just a quick minute from answering those because I do want to go to Deborah. So far, Deborah, we've talked about equipment and we've answered some technical questions. Your specialty is obviously in the interior finishing of the boats, but there is crossover between the hardscape items and the softscape. Can you give us just a quick rundown and some examples of some of the things that you cover in your initial meeting with the owners in terms of how you start your process?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Yes, we start with an expanded conversation, very much like Danny does, on how we're going to use the boat and where we're going to be cruising. So, for example, the growing family would have very different interior needs than the couple that cruises with some other friends. So we look at the best way to utilize all of our materials, whether it's within a color palette design aspect or how we utilize all of the space available. And so Jeff and myself and Danny will all work together on how all of those worlds meet to build the vessel that the owner is looking to do.
That's great. And Deborah, I've got a question for you as well. So Steve is asking, with our brokerage boats, would we be able to do some refits through Outer Reef, or do they need to go someplace else? I know you've helped many owners in refits, so maybe you could answer Steve's question quickly on just some of the things that you've done on some brokerage boats for doing some refit and allowing them to add a little bit of their personality to the boat.
Exactly, Mike. You hit the nail right there on the head. When we have sold a brokerage boat, I always make an effort to go and meet that new owner, and very often they do want to put their own stamp on the boat, and so we will work on whether it's reupholstering, new carpet, new wall covering materials, interior and exterior. And that is completely doable with all of our local vendors.
Okay, great. And just as a side note, guys, I know we were planning on running about 30 minutes, but we have a lot of questions. We're all willing to stick around. If you guys want to stay with us, we'll stay as long as you guys would like. So we have another question, Jeff, and this is a little bit of a technical question. And that is in terms of construction. Since we don't really have to ballast our boats, and the boats were really built with seakeeping and stability in mind, are there any advantages to chasing down any lighter construction methods in the fit out? If that were the case, do we think that would adversely or help performance?
That's a double-sided coin, Mike. To the person who asked the question.
Yeah, that was Michael.
Oh, Michael. We don't usually chase weight. We've had in the past some clients that had some specific speed ranges that they wanted to attain. We do sell boats with larger engine packages in it and to cruise 18, 20 knots, things of that nature. So weight is very critical at that point when you're talking about an extra 15 or 20,000 pounds in a boat. It is critical when you're talking about trying to attain those speeds.
Okay, so we do have another question on the Azure, and the question is, with custom boats, when will we have an Azure here? And again, typically, how long is the time frame from start to finish? So the Azure is a very popular boat, and it actually goes to a question that we're about to get to. The uniqueness of the Azure is that it is a galley aft boat and a center galley salon. So we do have the flexibility to do that. In terms of having one in the States, we're working on a few potential owners to build a boat that would come into the States. Right now, we would be looking at viewing the boat over in Europe when travel would permit, or we could do virtual tours with it. And then construction time from start to finish on the custom builds, again, based on the tooling and the availability of the molds, anything from, we'll call it 60 to 63 feet, typically 9 to 12 months, 70 feet, roughly 14 months. And when we get up into the mid 80s, we get out to around 18 again, depending on what we have in the mold and what work we have going on. So, Glenn?
Mike, let me elaborate a little bit on the Azure, the 64 Azure. Although we do not have one currently in build, we do have a couple that are in build that have some of the elements of the Azure. For example, we have a 72 that's being built that has the bridge view deck on it. The client wanted more of a traditional interior galley forward, saloon aft, but he really liked the idea of the walk around bridge view deck up on the flybridge. And so he picked that element off the Azure, and we incorporated that in his build. So some of the items that you see in the Azure model, if people like some of that look, we can incorporate pieces and parts into your build. So there is no one fixed design that we are tied to. It all comes down to what the client is looking for.
Great. We have a question from Glenn. Glenn, first of all, you said thank you for putting on the webinars. It's absolutely our pleasure. We really love talking about our boats, obviously, as you can tell. Jeff, Glenn's question is, can you give a little bit of insight into the hull lamination? As we had talked about last week, we use solid hand laid up fiberglass hulls, and maybe you can just expand a little bit on the construction on the hulls.
Yes, all our hulls are solid laminate from 6 inches above the waterline to below, and they're alternating layers of roving and matte. It's a pretty comprehensive schedule in this format. It's really hard to lay out all that schedule. If Glenn wants to chat offline, excuse me, we can give him a schedule of laminate. But then above the waterline, we core the hull sides, which is vacuum bagged coring. We use all Divinycell PVC core. And anything above the waterline is cored as well, as far as like the flybridge house, things of that nature. But other than that, everything is solid lamination, and that is to achieve number one, strength, and number two, center of gravities. With hull lamination very heavy and solid down below, it achieves that natural center of gravity, which led back to one of the questions someone I think posed before about ballast. That's why we really don't need to add ballast to our vessels. We actually build in our ballast in our lamination schedules.
Okay, and then just a quick follow-up. Glenn, we as a typical construction measure, we do not add Kevlar or carbon fiber. That being said, we have had many builds in the past where we have added layers of Kevlar, particularly on a bow section for boats that we're looking at doing some cruising up in the Northwest for logs and things. Obviously, as you know, the Kevlar is really a puncture resistant material. And so the question is, as a general practice, it is not included, but on many, many builds at the request of owners based on their cruising profile, we have absolutely used products like Kevlar to add some strength, particularly up in the bow section of the boat.
True, it's true. Again, all dependent if they're looking to bump into icebergs and run through sheet ice, for example, absolutely.
Let's see, we had another question from Peter in terms of engine overhaul times. So basically, Peter, diesel engines, their life expectancy is based on the gallons of diesel that go through them, not really the hours it takes. So for example, a Caterpillar C18 is typically good for 100,000 gallons of diesel fuel to go through it. The load factor and the rate that you put that fuel through it will obviously compound the timing for rebuilding. So for example, historically speaking, on most of the brokerage boats, when we've resold them and done surveys, our average boat runs at about 25 to maybe 28% engine load. We've had boats with 4,000 hours that have only had 30,000 gallons of fuel go through them. And on those particular engines, that's only 30% of the life expectancy. So It's not quite the number of hours on the boat, but it's the load factor that the engines are run, as well as how much diesel has actually gone through them. So I hope that answers your question. So we have a question for Deborah. How do you work? This is from Keith. How do you work with owners who are not local? And this is really, maybe you can just expand that, Deborah, because our whole build process we've done remotely many times.
Being that we are a global company, we facilitate clients all over the world in various time zones via, obviously, technology, modern technology, FaceTime, Skype, WhatsApp. We also utilize showrooms that are local to them so that they're able to go and view samples and make selections in that sense as well. And I also work very heavily, with the yard and communicating everything using Dropbox, email, you name it, text messages, all the ways that we can communicate.
All right, excellent. And also, just to expand on that a little bit, we also have European offices. We have design centers over there as well, and we also have service centers throughout Europe. So again, we've shipped boats into every continent. We have boats in Europe, Australia, and we are obviously set up for both the service on those boats as well as addressing the decor items and set up to do remote builds. See if we have any other. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we have a question from Steve, and that question is, what is the extent that Outer Reef assists the initial operation of the boat, including dockage, crew, to get potential owners up to speed on all aspects of the boat? So Steve, I'll answer that for you. So as part of our contract and general practices, once we get through the commissioning process, we offer an in-detail training session with Captain Randy Ives. Randy's been in this business for 45 years, and so we really do a comprehensive bow to stern review and orientation of all of the systems on the boat. So by the time we turn the boat over, you've really gone through all of the systems with Randy, and we've answered all the questions. We also have the QR code system, which we touched on last week, which would allow you, if you're in the engine room and you have a question on the fuel transfer system, with your phone, you can simply scan the code and it will take you directly to your owner's manual for your specific boat. And a lot of times we have instructional videos for those as well. So we're very geared towards owner operators and making the systems easy to understand and to educate you. In terms of actual boat handling, again, that's part of our standard procedure. Randy will take you out. We'll go through some basic handling, maneuvering of the boat. We'll go through some techniques for line handling, how to tie up the boat. We'll go through some anchoring techniques with snubber lines and things. So we do spend quite a bit of time educating both on the boat as well as the practicality of moving the boat, tying it up, and the systems. And then we're really only a phone call away. I mean, we all answer our phones almost 24/7, and all of our clients have a porthole that they can log into, that they can ask questions. So we really do pay a lot of attention after the fact on helping you manage the boat and make sure you're comfortable running it. So Steve, I hope that that answered your question. We also have a question, communication during the build. We have another gentleman, Steve, asking, what do we do with communications during the build? Jeff, can you give a little insight into how we communicate during this build process?
Sure. Obviously, communication is open 24/7 to the client. If he has any questions, we're at their disposal, any of the staff, any questions throughout the build. But what I typically do is I send personally every Friday to all the clients that have boats in build, Friday progress photos of their boats, and that will usually prompt a call or an email back from the client, or what's this or what's that, and this looks great, when is this happening, things of that nature. So they live virtually through the build process by these weekly photos, and it's a great process. It's It's helped us a number of times, police ourselves, for example. This clients who get their Friday photos every Friday, they're focused on their boat and their boat only. We're focused on multiple number of boats and build. And it'll occasionally happen, a client says, there's supposed to be a light switch on that wall over there. And sure enough, we go back and check, you're right, we're missing a light switch over there. So it's helpful for us. It's very interactive for the client. They like it. And it does get addictive though. And we have a 10-step program at the end of their Friday photos before their boat ships. And we sign them up for the 10-step program because they are pretty addictive, the Friday photos.
Okay. And Jeff, I have a question from Bill for you that you can answer as well, because this is really something that's near and dear to your heart. He's asking, does Randy help training for brokerage boats also, like we do the new boats? And I know that's such a huge thing for you. So
absolutely. Again, we don't care if you're the original owner of the boat or the 10th owner of the boat. You're treated as if you were the original owner of the boat. And on occasion, even though we get all our listings back, someone else will sell our boat, an outside broker. It doesn't matter who buys a boat or where they are in the world. I send Randy at my expense to anywhere in the world to give that person training on that boat, even if they did not buy the boat from us, because we want them to understand that vessel and to really enhance their ownership experience. And when you get that hands-on training from the builder of the boat, it makes a huge difference. And I'm not belittling outside brokers, but they're just selling the boat. We know the boat intimately from the beginning to end. And Randy in particular was likely on that boat during the build process, and he knows intimately that boat. So yes, it's a service that we provide, regardless if you're the original owner or you buy it through an outside broker. 10 years from now, someone else sells that boat, and we understand it was a sale. We offer that service. So yes, that is part of what we do.
Okay. And we also have a question from Bill, who's asking, what's our experience with the zero-speed stabilizer at rest system?
In reference to our fin stabilizers, I think they're the best thing since sliced bread, as the saying goes. They're amazing. The first time I was on one of our boats with zero-speed stabilization, I can say it was just like the first time I was on a boat with stabilizers. It's just totally amazing. But they do work very, very well. Obviously, in our style of boat and the size of our boats and displacement, gyros are not really an option. So the only option for stabilization and rest is fin stabilizers. And I can tell you, it's amazing how well they work. Yes, it's absolutely a fantastic piece of equipment if you cruise in areas where you're subject to broadside sea swell, things of that nature, such as in the lower Caribbean and things. It's a nice feature to have.
Okay. Deborah, we have a question from Shelley. She's wondering if you work with outside designers.
Yes, absolutely. In our ongoing effort to serve our customers to the best of our ability, if they happen to have a relationship with a designer, we definitely work with them in conjunction to design the boat how they need it to be.
Excellent. Thank you. We also had a follow-up question from Brett on warranty work. How do we work on from the warranty side of things? Jeff, do you want to? Sure.
Well, sure. From a warranty standpoint, I don't know if he's talking about from a logistics standpoint or whatever. Obviously, you can go into any one of our warranty centers throughout the United States or Europe, or if you happen to be someplace that is not accessible to one of our service centers, we will just send someone to you. Put Randy on a plane with equipment, and we send him to you to get you up and going. We understand that for a lot of cruises, it's not a full-time thing, and their time is valuable, and they're cruising, they want to be out cruising. So we understand that. We sympathize when there's an issue, and we'll just send our staff on plane, send them where they have to be to get you up and going.
Yeah, and as a great example of that, Jeff, and you'll probably remember this, we had one of the boats who inexplicably lost both alternators when they were down at Highbourne Key, and we chartered that plane out of Lauderdale Executive, and me and the mechanic and 2 alternators flew down to the Bahamas, swapped out his alternators, and came back that day. So that's just a real world example of some of the things that happened, and he never got a bill for any of that. So that was within his warranty period. And then to expand a little bit further, all the major pieces of equipment on the boat have manufacturer's warranties as well. So we coordinate the coverage of those warranties. We register the warranties as well. So you're never left on your own if there's an issue with the boat and it's a warranty. You can, again, go through the portal that we have set up, or you can pick up the phone and call us, and we basically get involved in all of those things to facilitate that happening.
Yeah, we don't, we like you to call us first. There's no reason for you to get into the middle of a coordination of a warranty issue with a piece of equipment that's on board. You call us and we take care of all that for you. There's nothing really for you to do. So let us know when you're going to be on the boat, and we'll send our technician over there, whether it be a technician from an outside piece of equipment or our technician for warranty on the boat itself.
Well, I think we've run a little bit late, and we certainly appreciate everybody's interest in staying with us. We want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you have any questions, until we sign off, you can still send them over. I think we've gotten to everyone here. Oh, I just got a question from Peter. So Peter's been looking at different boats, and he's wondering the difference between building in Taiwan and Croatia, and the difference in the Trident, and why we chose to build over there. You want to answer that, Jeff, or would you like me to?
You can answer that, Mike, and maybe I'm gonna just take a little part of that first, and you can elaborate on the Croatian side since you're running our Croatian division. Excuse me. One of the advantages of building in Taiwan, obviously, a lot of our competition is Chinese built, and if anybody's been watching the news for the past 2 years, huge tariffs are on products coming in from China. Taiwan is not subject to tariffs as Chinese-built vessels because we're a favored nation of the U.S. Taiwan is a favored nation of the U.S., and there are no import tariffs, whereas some of our competition who are built in China are subject to up to 25% of tariffs. So that's something very important to consider when you look to build a vessel of what does it really cost you at the end of the day. So I'll segue that back to you, Mike, if you want to elaborate further on Croatia.
Yeah, sure. So when we designed the Trident series, we had that designed by a very famous naval architect, Ward Setzer. And the boat really was meant to be a little bit of a faster boat, a little bit more efficient with standard engines. And this kind of goes back to one of the previous questions on lighter materials. And so Croatia had a very good history of shipbuilding, and we have a shipyard over in Croatia. The biggest part of that is it's a resin-infused boat. We do start with a solid fiberglass spine, we'll say, that goes about 3 feet out from the center of the keel. But the construction methods on that boat were a little bit different than what the shipyard in Taiwan was used to doing. And so the economies over there were pretty good. The burden labor rate was pretty comparable to Taiwan, so we were able to competitively build that boat over there. And the fact that the whole construction techniques were very different from Tania and what they're doing in Taiwan, it was just the right fit for that particular project. We had a comment from one of the gentlemen, and I wanted to thank him. He said, "Thank you so much for putting on these seminars," and he really hasn't seen many people, companies care about their work, or their owners, and he said it is top notch. So Steve, thank you so much for the comments. We appreciate you, watching for us and being part of these programs. We really do care about our owners. We're really here to really put your vision into fiberglass and wood and materials and get you guys out on the water. I think that was the last question that we had. So I think we're kind of ready to wrap it up. We want to thank everybody again who joined us today, who joined us last week. Thank you so much for all the questions. You can always reach us online through our webpage, If you had a particular sales rep, you can email them. We'll be happy to get back in touch with you. Again, we'll be hosting some other webinars in the future. We'll have a little bit more of an in-depth look at the build process in our next webinar, which will be about mid-June. So you'll be getting information on that as well. And that will be kind of a continuation, a little more detail in some of the things we spoke about today. And lastly, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to put up a quick little question up on your screen there. If you could just take 30 seconds and just let us know if the timing on these are okay, if you think we should be at a different time. We're just trying to get some feedback to make sure that our webinars are convenient for our prospective owners. So thank you guys all very much. It's been a pleasure. We loved all of your questions, and we look forward to seeing you guys again in a couple weeks.